They say the forests of Washington state hold secrets older than human memory. The local tribe spoke of a creature that walked like a man, but wasn't one. A giant covered in thick fur that ruled these woods long before settlers arrived. The white men called it Bigfoot, but the natives knew it by older names, spoken in whispers around fires that couldn't quite push back the darkness. The Yakima Valley holds more sightings than most places. Something about these dense forests, these ancient trees, seems to draw them. Hunters tell stories of massive footprints in impossible places, of howls that sound almost human, but carry something else in their depths, something older, something wilder. I never believed those stories. 15 years in the army teaches you that most monsters wear human faces. But one night at Yakima Training Center changed everything I thought I knew about what walks in the darkness. This is what happened. The stars hung like ice over Yakima Training Center, their cold light doing little to penetrate the darkness between the trees. I sat in the commander's seat of our gun truck, scanning the perimeter through the CROW system, while Specialist Eddie Lopez handled the driving. "Sure is quiet out here, Sarge," Lopez said, his voice carrying that edge people get when darkness starts playing tricks with their minds. "Kind of makes you think about those stories, you know?" "What stories?" I asked, though I already knew. Everyone at Yakima had heard them. Bigfoot sightings. Lopez's eyes kept drifting to the tree line. "My cousin's friend was hiking up here last summer. Said he saw something big, walking on two legs, but definitely not human." "Your cousin's friend need glasses, Lopez." I tried for humor, but something about the darkness pressing against our windows made it fall flat. "I'm serious, Sarge. These woods, there's something about them. The locals say Bigfoot's been here forever, that it protects its territory, that it watches people who come too deep into its domain." I was about to tell him to can the campfire stories when something moved at the edge of the crow's range. Just a shadow, there and gone, but bigger than any shadow had a right to be. "Contact?" Lopez asked, catching my sudden tension. "Negative," I replied after a moment. "Probably deer, or maybe a bear." But we both knew bears didn't walk upright, didn't move with that strange, fluid grace that had caught my eye for just a second. The darkness pressed closer, and somewhere in the distance, something waited. "Movement, 2 o'clock. Lopez's voice cracked slightly as he stared at the crow monitor. "Sarge, there's someone out there." "Can't be," I replied automatically. "Nearest unit is 15 clicks south. No one else should be in this sector." "Then what the hell is that?" I swung the crow around to where he was pointing. The thermal imaging painted the world in false colors, greens and blacks with heat signatures showing bright. At first I saw nothing but trees. Then something moved. The figure was enormous. Standing upright, it towered over the surrounding vegetation, easily 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Its heat signature blazed against the cool background, suggesting a body mass that defied belief. "Jesus Christ," I breathed, adjusting the focus. That can't be human." The creature moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for its size. Each step was deliberate, precise, showing an intelligence that sent chills down my spine. Its arms hung low, too low, ending in massive hands that could probably crush a man's skull like an egg. "Bigfoot," Lopez whispered. "Sarge, we're looking at fucking Bigfoot." I wanted to dismiss it, to find some rational explanation. But the longer I watched, the more undeniable it became. The proportions were all wrong for a human, even a large one. The way it moved spoke of raw power contained within that massive frame. "Getting measurements," I reported, trying to maintain some semblance of military procedure. "Subject is approximately 8 feet tall. Estimated mass." I swallowed hard. At least 500 pounds. The creature paused in its movement, head turning toward our position. Even through the thermal imaging, I could feel its gaze, Intelligent, calculating, ancient. This wasn't some mindless beast. This was something that knew exactly what it was looking at. "It sees us," Lopez said quietly. "How can it see us?" "We're running dark, 400 meters out, but it did see us. Its head tracked our position perfectly, and for a moment, I swore I saw its lips pull back in what might have been a smile. Then it simply vanished. One moment it was there, the next it had melted into the shadows between the trees with a speed and silence that something that size shouldn't have been capable of. "Tell me you got that on record." Lopez's hands shook slightly on the controls. I checked the crow's system. The footage was there, clear thermal imaging of something that shouldn't exist, something that would change everything we thought we knew about what lived in these woods. "I got it," I confirmed. "But Lopez..." "Yeah, Sarge. I'm not sure we want anyone else to see it. Not yet. Because if that's really what we think it is, then we're in its territory," he finished. "And it just let us know it's watching." Nature has a way of asserting itself at the worst possible moments. After 2 hours of tense scanning following our sighting, my bladder made it clear that I couldn't stay in the truck forever. "I need to step out," I told Lopez, who hadn't taken his eyes off the crow screen since we'd seen the creature. "Keep scanning. Anything moves, you sing out." "Sarge," his voice was tight, "that's a real bad idea right now. Unless you've got an empty Gatorade bottle." He didn't laugh, just gripped the crow controls tighter and nodded. 360 security, got it, but make it quick." The moment I opened the door, the night air hit me like a physical presence. It carried smells I hadn't noticed before. Wet earth, pine sap, and something else. Something musky and wild that made the primitive part of my brain scream danger. My boots crunched on gravel as I moved to the side of the truck, trying to stay within the imagined bubble of safety its armor provided. Every sound seemed magnified. The rustle of my uniform, my own breathing, the slow creak of trees in the light wind. That's when I heard it. The sound started low, almost subsonic, more felt than heard. A deep, rumbling vocalization that no known animal should have been able to produce. It built slowly, rising in pitch and volume until it became an unmistakable howl. The howl carried impossible harmonics, part animal, part something almost human, but wrong in ways that made my skin crawl. It spoke of age, of power, of territorial dominance that predated human civilization. "Lopez," I called softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "You got eyes on anything?" "Negative, but..." He paused. Thermals showing something weird, like heat blooms moving through the trees. They're getting closer." I started to turn back toward the truck, but movement caught my eye. At the edge of the tree line, something massive shifted in the darkness. The moonlight caught its outline for just a moment, an impossible silhouette of matted fur and massive shoulders, topped by a head that seemed almost human in its proportions. Its eyes caught the light and reflected it back. Not the green shine of a predator's eyes, but something deeper, more intelligent. Something that watched me with undeniable awareness. "Mac!" Lopez's voice cracked with urgency. "Get back in. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. Training took over where conscious thought failed, carrying me back to the truck in 3 quick steps. Behind me, that howl rose again, closer now, carrying notes that might have been warning or might have been amusement. Just as I reached for the door handle, I felt it. A displacement of air, a presence of impossible mass moving with impossible silence. The musky smell intensified, and for just a moment I swear I felt breath on the back of my neck, hot, wet, carrying that same wild scent. I practically dove into the truck, slamming the door with more force than necessary. My hands shook as I tried to work the handle. "Jesus Christ," Lopez whispered, staring at the CROW screen. "Sarge, it's right there. It followed you right to the truck." Through the monitor, I saw it, the massive figure standing less than 10 meters from our position. In the thermal imaging, its body blazed with heat, suggesting a metabolism unlike anything known to science. It stood motionless, watching us with that same unsettling intelligence. Then it raised one massive hand in what could only be described as a gesture, deliberate, calculated, almost like a wave, or maybe a warning. "It's not just big," I said quietly, watching it move back toward the trees with that fluid, silent grace. "It's smart. It knows exactly what we are, what we're doing here. And it wants us to know that it knows," Lopez finished, his voice barely a whisper. The creature paused at the tree line, turning back to face us one last time. Even through the thermal imaging, its expression was unnervingly clear, not the mindless stare of an animal, but the calculating gaze of something that understood far more than it should. Then it was gone, melting into the darkness as if it had never been. But we both knew it was still out there, watching, waiting. This was its territory. We were just visitors it hadn't decided whether to tolerate. Lopez's hands were white-knuckled on the crow controls. 50 meters and closing. The thermal imaging showed a massive heat signature emerging from the tree line. But this time it wasn't trying to hide. This time, it wanted to be seen. "Sweet Jesus," I breathed, adjusting the magnification. "Look at the size of it." In the crow's display, the creature stood fully exposed in the moonlight. Everything about it defied conventional understanding. Its height, easily 8 feet, was just the beginning. The breadth of its shoulders suggested muscle mass that would put a grizzly to bear to shame. Its arms, hanging low past its hips, ended in hands that looked disturbingly human, but scaled up to nightmarish proportions. The face was what hit me hardest. Not quite human, not quite ape, but something in between that spoke of intelligence we weren't prepared to comprehend. Its eyes, deep set under a heavy brow, stared directly into our camera with undeniable awareness. "It knows we're watching it," Lopez whispered. It's studying us back." He was right. The creature's head tilted slightly, an almost contemplative gesture. Its mouth, too human-like for comfort, moved in what might have been a grimace or might have been a smile, revealing teeth that could probably snap bone like twigs. "Get on the radio," I ordered. "We need to report this." But before Lopez could reach for the handset, the creature took a deliberate step forward. Its movement was pure power contained, each muscle rippling under thick matted fur that seemed to absorb moonlight rather than reflect it. "Sarge," Lopez's voice shook slightly. "What do we do if it comes for the truck?" As if in response to his question, the creature raised one massive hand. The gesture was unmistakably deliberate, palm out, fingers spread, like someone signaling stop. A human gesture. A thinking gesture. "It's not attacking," I realized aloud. "It's communicating." The beast's head nodded, actually nodded, as if confirming my observation. Then it took another step closer, its face filling our screen. The intelligence in its eyes was undeniable now. This wasn't just some undiscovered primate. This was something else entirely. "Look at the way it's moving," I said, professional curiosity fighting with instinctive fear. "That's not random. Those are calculated movements. It's showing us exactly what it wants us to see." The creature's lips pulled back again, and this time there was no mistaking the expression. It was smiling, not in friendship, but in the way a teacher might smile at students finally grasping a lesson. It raised its other hand, making another deliberate gesture, pointing first to itself, then to the woods around us, then to our truck. The message was clear. "This is my territory. You are visitors here." "Christ," Lopez muttered. "It's not just smart. It's trying to tell us something." The beast nodded again, its eyes never leaving our camera. Then it did something that made both of us forget to breathe. It raised one finger to its lips in the universal gesture for quiet. Did it just... Lopez couldn't finish the sentence. Yeah, I answered, watching as the creature began to back away, its movements still deliberate, still calculated for maximum impact. It just told us to keep our mouths shut about what we're seeing. Before it melted back into the shadows, it made one final gesture, tapping its head, then pointing to us. The message couldn't have been clearer if it had spoken. I'm watching you, I'm thinking, I'm understanding everything you do. This changes everything, Lopez said quietly as the massive form disappeared into the darkness. If they're this intelligent, if they can communicate like this, then maybe, I finished, they've been watching us a lot longer than we've been watching them. It started as a low rumble, so deep we felt it in our bones before we heard it. The truck's windows vibrated slightly, and our equipment readings flickered with interference. What the hell is that? Lopez whispered, though we both knew. We were about to hear what a Bigfoot's challenge really sounded like. The howl, when it came, defied description. It started in subsonic registers that made our teeth ache, then built into something that shouldn't have been possible from any living creature's throat. The sound contained layers, harmonics that spoke of raw power and territorial dominance, but also intelligence that made it worse somehow. This wasn't just an animal's call. This was a message. Jesus Christ, Lopez breathed, his face pale in the instrument lights. That's not nothing makes a sound like that. He was right. The howl echoed across the valley, bouncing back from the mountains until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. But there was something else in it, something almost like speech patterns, as if the creature was trying to communicate in its own language. Multiple signatures, Lopez called out suddenly, staring at the crow screen. 3 no, 4 heat blooms moving through the trees. The thermal imaging showed massive forms converging on our position, each blazing with that impossible body heat. They moved in coordination, taking positions around our truck like soldiers executing a planned maneuver. Then the original howl was answered. First one, then another, then more. Deep, thunderous calls that contained those same speech-like patterns. They were coordinating, communicating in ways that suggested not just intelligence, but complex social structure. They're talking to each other, I said quietly, watching the heat signatures move with deliberate purpose. Actually talking. The first creature, the one that had shown itself to us, appeared again at the edge of our view. It stood upright, its massive form silhouetted against the trees, and let out another howl. This one was different, more complex, carrying patterns that reminded me of military call and response protocols. The others answered in sequence, each call distinct, but part of a larger communication. They were demonstrating not just their presence, but their organization, their ability to work as a unit. Sarge, Lopez's voice was barely a whisper. They're not just big apes out here surviving. They're organized. They have language. They have tactics. The main creature stepped forward, its form filling our thermal screen. It opened its mouth, and what came out wasn't just a howl. It was an almost word, a sound that sat right on the edge of human speech. The others fell silent, responding to what could only be described as a command. They have hierarchy, I realized aloud. Chain of command. This one's their leader. As if confirming my observation, the creature let out one final call, shorter, sharper, carrying notes that vibrated through our bodies and made the truck's metal groan. The others immediately began moving back into the trees, responding to orders we couldn't understand, but could recognize from years of military service. The leader remained, staring at our truck with those terribly intelligent eyes. Then it smiled again, that same knowing expression, and opened its mouth one last time. The sound it produced was like nothing I'd ever heard. Not quite speech, not quite animal call, but something in between that suggested it could do either if it chose to. The message was clear. We don't speak your language because we choose not to, not because we can't. They're letting us know, Lopez said softly, showing us exactly how advanced they are, how organized. But why? Why now? The answer came in another howl, this one carrying notes that made our spines trying to crawl out of our backs. It wasn't just a display of power or territory, it was a warning. This is what we are. This is what we can do. Remember this when you think about coming back. Get the crow's recording system running, I ordered, fighting to keep my voice steady. Everything, thermal, night vision, audio. We need proof of what's happening here. Lopez's fingers flew over the controls, but something was wrong. The screens flickered with interference, the thermal imaging breaking up into static at crucial moments. Systems acting weird, Sarge, he reported, frustration evident in his voice. It's like something's affecting the electronics. Every time I get a clear shot of them, the recording breaks up. I pulled out my personal phone, against regulations, but this was beyond protocols now. The screen showed no signal, and the camera app crashed every time I tried to open it. They're doing something, I realized. Somehow they're affecting our equipment. The electromagnetic interference, it's centered on them. As if to demonstrate, the creature let out another of those impossible howls, and every electronic device in the truck went haywire. The crow's screen filled with static, our radios emitted high-pitched squeals, and both our phones died completely. Try the dash cam, I suggested. It's on a separate system. Lopez reached for it, but the leader chose that moment to approach our truck. Each step it took was deliberate, measured, its massive form moving with that fluid grace that denied physics. Through the windshield, we could see it clearly now. No electronics, no thermal imaging, just 8 feet of muscled power covered in thick, dark fur. It stopped right in front of our truck, close enough that we could see the steam of its breath in the cold air. Its face, now terrifyingly visible, held an expression that I can only describe as amused intelligence. "The camera," Lopez whispered. "Is it?" "Recording," I confirmed, watching the dash cam's tiny red light, finally getting something. The creature's eyes fixed on the camera, then, with deliberate slowness, it reached out one massive hand and tapped the windshield, not hard enough to crack it, but with precise force that sent vibrations through the entire truck. The dash cam died. "Son of a bitch," Lopez breathed. They know. They know exactly what we're trying to do." The beast's lips pulled back in that terrible smile again, revealing teeth that could probably crush bone. It raised one finger to its lips, that same shushing gesture from before, then pointed to its own eyes, then to us. "They don't want to be documented," I said, understanding flooding in. "All these years, all these sightings, they let themselves be seen when they choose, how they choose." The creature nodded, actually nodded, then took several steps back. It made a gesture with one hand, and suddenly the electronic interference cleared. Our equipment came back online, screens lighting up just in time to catch the massive forms retreating into the trees. "Look at the recordings," Lopez said, checking the CROW system. "Everything from the last 10 minutes, it's gone. Corrupted. Except..." He played back the audio. Through the static and interference, one sound came through perfectly clear. That last, terrible howl that carried almost words. A message preserved exactly as they wanted it to be. They're controlling the narrative, I realized. Letting us keep just enough to know we didn't imagine it, but never enough to prove anything to others. The leader paused at the tree line, turning back to face us one last time. In the restored thermal imaging, its heat signature blazed like a beacon. It raised one hand in what might have been a wave, or might have been a warning, then melted into the darkness with that impossible silence. Our equipment worked perfectly after that, recording nothing but empty woods and normal night sounds. But we both knew what we'd seen, what we'd learned. "So what do we report?" Lopez asked quietly. "How do we even begin to explain this?" I stared at the tree line where our visitors had vanished, remembering that intelligent gaze, those deliberate gestures, that ability to control what we could and couldn't record. "Maybe," I said slowly, "that's the final lesson they're teaching us. Some things aren't meant to be proven, just experienced, just remembered." Hours dragged by like years. Lopez hadn't moved from the crow controls, his eyes scanning constantly between the thermal and night vision feeds. I kept checking my watch. 200, 300, 400. Time seemed to move differently after what we'd seen. "They're still out there," Lopez said quietly, not for the first time. "Just watching now." He was right. The thermal imaging occasionally picked up brief heat signatures, massive forms moving through the trees at the edge of our range. They were maintaining a perimeter around us, I realized. Military precision in the movements of creatures science said shouldn't exist. "Look at their patrol pattern," I noted, professional training trying to make sense of the impossible. "They're coordinating, moving like they've got sector assignments, overlapping fields of observation." "Like us," Lopez agreed, "but better. No radio chatter, no visible signals, but they're all moving in perfect sync." A flash of movement caught my eye, one of the creatures crossing between trees about 200 meters out. The way it moved, I'd seen special forces operators who couldn't move that smoothly, that silently. "How long do you think they've been studying us, Sarge?" Lopez asked, his voice tight. "Not just tonight. I mean all of us, the military, our operations." "Years," I replied, watching another heat signature ghost through our perimeter. "Decades, maybe, learning our patterns, our technology, our tactics. Everything we do out here they've been watching, learning." The radio crackled suddenly, the first sound it had made since their display of power. But instead of static or interference, we heard something else. The sound of our own voices, played back perfectly from earlier in the night. "They recorded us," Lopez whispered. They're mimicking our comms." The radio fell silent again, but the message was clear. They understood more than just our movements. They understood our technology, our communications, our entire operational structure. Through the crow's screen, I watched one of the larger heat signatures pause in its patrol. It turned to face our position directly, and even at this distance I could feel its gaze. It raised one hand in that deliberate way they had, pointing first to its eyes, then to us, then tapping its own head. "They want us to know they're intelligent," I said quietly. "Not just strong, not just organized, but thinking, understanding. Everything we see them do is deliberate." "Why?" Lopez asked. "Why show us all this? Why not just stay hidden like they obviously can?" As if in answer, the radio crackled again. This time, it played back the sound of their howls, but overlaid with our own radio protocols, our call signs, our position reports. They weren't just mimicking, they were demonstrating comprehension. Because they're tired of hiding, I realized. Or number. They were never really hiding. They were observing, learning. And now they want us to know that they know. That every time we come out here thinking we're alone, thinking we're in control, we're being watched, Lopez finished. Studied, like we're the specimens in some kind of experiment. Another heat signature moved at the edge of our range. This one paused, stood upright, and made that now familiar gesture, finger to lips, then pointing to its eyes. Watching, always watching. The night stretched on, and with each passing hour, the weight of what we'd discovered pressed down harder. We weren't just dealing with some undiscovered species. We were dealing with something intelligent, organized, and capable of understanding us far better than we understood them, and they wanted us to know it. The first impact caught us completely off guard. Something massive struck the side of the truck, rocking it on its suspension. Not hard enough to damage, they were too controlled for that, but enough to remind us how easily they could if they wanted to. "Multiple signatures converging," Lopez called out, his hands flying over the crow controls. "They're Jesus Christ. They're surrounding us." The thermal imaging showed them clearly now. 4 massive forms moving with that impossible fluid grace, coordinating their approach like a well-trained fire team. The leader, larger than the others, took position directly in front of our truck. "They're herding us," I realized, "making sure we can't move without their permission." As if confirming my assessment, another impact struck the rear of the truck. Through the crow's screen, I watched one of the creatures press its massive hand against our armor, not attacking, but demonstrating how easily it could. "Sarge," Lopez's voice shook slightly. "Look at the front." The leader had approached to within touching distance. In the moonlight, every detail was horrifyingly clear. The massive muscles rippling under thick fur, the 2 human hands that could probably tear steel, and that face, that terribly intelligent face that held expression no animal should have been capable of. It reached out, slowly and deliberately, and pressed one hand against our windshield. The glass creaked under its touch, but didn't break. It wasn't trying to break in. It was measuring its own strength, showing us exactly how much control it had. "Don't move," I ordered Lopez, though he was frozen anyway. "They're not attacking. They're demonstrating." The creature's eyes met mine through the glass. The intelligence there was undeniable, calculating, ancient. It tilted its head slightly, studying our reactions, then did something that stopped my heart. It smiled and nodded. A sound filled the truck, not through our radios this time, but through the metal itself. A deep, resonant rumble that carried those same speech-like patterns we'd heard before. The others answered, their calls creating a harmony that made our bones vibrate. "They're talking about us," Lopez whispered, "actually discussing what to do with us." The leader pulled back slightly, then made a series of deliberate gestures, pointing to its eyes, then to us, then to the base in the distance. The message was clear. "We see you. We see everything." Another impact, this one from above. Massive hands drummed a pattern on our roof. Not random, but rhythmic, almost like Morse code. They were demonstrating communication, showing us yet another way they understood our methods. "The cameras," Lopez said suddenly. "Sarge, look at how they're positioning themselves. They're letting us see exactly what they want us to see." He was right. Each creature had taken a position that displayed its full size and capabilities while staying just at the edge of our clearest recording range. They were controlling the documentation of their own existence. The leader pressed its hand against the glass one more time, but now it began to draw. Using just its finger and the condensation on the windshield, it traced symbols, not random marks, but clear reproductions of our unit insignia, our vehicle markings, our rank insignias. "They know everything about us," I said quietly. "Every detail, every procedure, every marker of who we are and what we do here." The creature's smile widened, showing teeth that could probably crush bone. It nodded again, a terrifyingly human gesture, then pulled back. With a series of short, sharp vocalizations that could only be orders, it directed the others to move back as well. But before they melted into the darkness, the leader made one final demonstration. It picked up a fallen branch, thick as my arm, and with casual ease, crushed it to splinters in one hand. Then it very deliberately dropped the pieces and made that now familiar gesture. Finger to lips, eyes on us, tapping its own head. The message couldn't have been clearer. We can destroy you anytime we want, but we choose to watch and learn instead. Remember that. Dawn crept over Yakima Training Center like a reluctant confession, revealing what the night had tried to hide. Lopez and I stepped out of the truck carefully, weapons ready, though we both knew they'd be useless against what we'd encountered. "Sweet Jesus," Lopez breathed, staring at the ground around our vehicle. "Look at the size of these." The footprints were massive, each one nearly 24 inches long and 8 inches wide, pressed deep into the hard ground. But it wasn't just their size that was unnerving. It was their precision. "They're deliberate," I said, kneeling to examine one print. "Look at the placement, perfect heel-to-toe roll, weight distribution like a trained operator moving tactically. These aren't just animal tracks." I was right. The prints formed perfect patrol patterns around our position, coordinated movement paths that showed military-level tactical awareness. They'd maintained a perfect perimeter all night, with overlapping fields of observation that would have made any command sergeant major proud. "Over here, Sarge," Lopez called from near the truck. They left something." Where the leader had stood, we found more than just footprints. Arranged with deliberate care were items that made my blood run cold. A spent brass casing from last week's training exercise, a torn piece of camo netting we'd lost on patrol 2 months ago, and most disturbingly, a unit patch that had gone missing from Captain Roberts' uniform 3 days ago. They've been collecting, I realized, studying us, learning about everything we do out here. But it was what we found pressed into the mud beside these items that truly shook us. Using just finger marks in the soil, they'd drawn perfect reproductions of our unit's tactical symbols, patrol routes, and radio frequencies. "Look how deep these prints are," Lopez said, measuring one with his hand. "The force needed to compress the ground this much. We're talking at least 800 pounds of weight, maybe more. But the way they moved. Like special forces operators," I finished. "All that mass, all that power, but moving with more skill than our best trained soldiers." We followed the tracks to the tree line, taking photos and measurements, though we both knew they'd never see an official report. The prints told a story of coordinated movement, of organized patrol patterns, of intelligence that matched or exceeded our own military training. At the edge of the woods, we found their final message. Using broken branches and disturbed earth, they'd created a clear representation of our base's layout. Every building, every guard post, every security camera position marked with unsettling accuracy. "They know everything about us," Lopez said quietly. "Every detail of our operations, our security, our procedures. They've been watching and learning for God knows how long." I knelt to examine one last print, this one even larger than the others, left by the leader. In the center of its palm impression, pressed with surgical precision, was a perfect impression of my sergeant's rank insignia. "Not just watching," I corrected. "Teaching. Everything they showed us last night, everything they left here, it's a message. A demonstration of just how much they understand about us, and how little we understand about them." The morning sun did nothing to warm the chill that realization sent through us. Somewhere in those woods, something ancient and intelligent was still watching, still learning, still deciding how much to reveal about itself. And we were just beginning to understand our role in their long, patient study of human behavior. The command post's fluorescent lights felt obscenely normal after what we'd experienced. Captain Roberts sat behind his desk, looking between us and the evidence we'd collected with an expression that shifted between disbelief and carefully managed fear. "Let me get this straight, Sergeant McDermott," he said, handling the photos like they might bite him. "You're reporting contact with multiple Bigfoot specimens that demonstrated not just intelligence, but tactical awareness and understanding of military operations. Yes, sir. I kept my voice steady, professional. At least 4 distinct individuals, leader approximately 8 feet tall, displaying coordinated movement patterns and clear understanding of our procedures. Lopez stood at parade rest beside me, but I could feel his tension. On Robert's desk lay our evidence, thermal imaging printouts, photos of the footprints, and most damning of all, his own missing unit patch recovered from their display. And these beings, Roberts continued, examining a photo of the tactical symbols they'd drawn in the mud. They deliberately demonstrated knowledge of our operations, our communications, our security procedures. Sir, they don't just know about us. I leaned forward slightly. They've been studying us, learning everything about how we operate. Those patrol patterns they used, that was better tactical movement than most of our trained units display. Roberts picked up his missing unit patch, turning it over in slightly trembling hands. This could be coincidence, lost during normal operations, and the perfect reproduction of our tactical symbols. Lopez broke in, his voice tight. The patrol routes, the radio frequencies. Sir, they know everything about us. What they know, Robert snapped, but his eyes kept darting to the woods visible through his window, is irrelevant because this report cannot exist. Do you understand what accepting this would mean? What it would do to operations? To morale? Sir, I said carefully, noting how he'd moved his desk away from the window. These creatures have been here longer than we have. They're intelligent, organized, and they've been watching us learn to fight while they've been learning about us. Don't you think that's something command should know? Robert stood abruptly, pacing to the window before thinking better of it and moving back. Do you know how many reports I've had to bury over the years? How many soldiers have come to me with stories of something watching them during night ops? Of missing equipment found arranged in patterns? Of howls that sound almost like words? Then you know we're telling the truth, I pressed. You know they're out there. What I know, he turned to face us, is that I can't file a report saying the largest military training center in Washington state is under observation by intelligent, tactically aware creatures that science says don't exist. That our security has been compromised not by foreign agents or domestic terrorists, but by something that's been here since before we built this base. As if on cue, a deep, resonant howl echoed from the distant woods. Roberts flinched visibly. The evidence, Lopez started, will be classified. Roberts cut him off. Sealed. This conversation never happened. Officially, you encountered large wildlife during your patrol. Nothing more. Sir, I tried one last time. They wanted us to see them, to understand what they are, what they know. Doesn't that suggest we should be paying attention? Roberts was silent for a long moment, staring at his recovered unit patch. Finally, he looked up, and I saw real fear in his eyes. Sergeant, he said quietly, which scenario do you think is better for this command? That we admit these creatures exist and have been studying our every move for years? Or that we continue to let them observe while pretending we don't know they're there? Through the window, something large moved in the distant tree line, something that stood upright and, just for a moment, raised its hand in what might have been a wave. Dismissed, Roberts said quickly, turning away from the window. And Sergeant? Some knowledge, some truths, are better left unspoken, for everyone's sake. As we left his office, I glanced back to see him picking up his phone. But before he could dial, every electronic device in the room, phones, computers, radios, emitted a burst of static that formed into a sound halfway between a laugh and a howl. Roberts put the phone down very carefully and closed his blinds. The mess hall hummed with low conversations that weren't quite whispers, but never rose to normal volume. A week had passed since our encounter, and despite official silence, something had changed. You could see it in how soldiers clustered together, in how their eyes constantly drifted to the windows facing the tree line. Heard Alpha Company had something weird happen on their night op. Private Chen muttered, sliding his tray next to mine. Their comms went crazy, started playing back their own radio chatter from previous patrols, but changed somehow, like something was learning their protocols. Lopez pushed his food around his plate, uneaten. Neither of us had been sleeping well. Every night, watch now carried the weight of knowing we weren't alone out there, and more importantly, that we weren't the ones in control. Watson's team found their missing equipment yesterday. Another soldier joined our table, speaking low. All laid out in perfect patrol formation, with their movement routes drawn in the dirt. Said it had to be a prank, but he swallowed hard. The footprints around it were huge. I watched the ripple of tension move through the room as more soldiers added their experiences. Each story followed a pattern. Electronics acting strange, evidence of impossible surveillance, glimpses of massive figures moving with military precision through the woods. My squad saw something during PT. Sergeant Willis spoke up from nearby, standing right at the edge of the trees, watching us run, 8 feet tall at least. Thought it was a shadow at first, but then it copied our formation. Started moving like we were moving. Learning. The mess hall's lights flickered briefly, and every soldier fell silent. We'd all learned what those power fluctuations meant now. They're not even trying to hide anymore, Lopez said quietly. It's like they want us to know they're watching, learning, understanding. As if in response, the window nearest our table frosted over despite the warm day. In the condensation, perfect reproductions of unit insignias and rank symbols appeared, drawn from the outside by something with enormous fingers and unsettling precision. Jesus, Chen whispered. How long have they been studying us? How much do they know? Everything, I answered, watching the frost patterns form into tactical movement diagrams. They know every patrol route, every radio frequency, every standard operating procedure. They've been learning warfare from us for years. But why? Someone asked. Why show themselves now? The answer came in an unexpected way. Every phone in the mess hall lit up simultaneously, displaying the same text message despite the notorious lack of signal in the area. Watching, learning, understanding. They're evolving, Lopez realized aloud. Not just physically, but technologically. Everything we use, every system we develop, they're studying it, understanding it, maybe improving on it. The lights flickered again, and through the windows, we all saw them. Massive shadows moving with fluid grace between the trees, demonstrating the tactical movements they'd learned from watching us. Their patrol pattern was perfect, their coordination flawless. Command says we're supposed to ignore it, Willis said. Pretend we don't see them. But they want us to see them now, I finished. Want us to understand what they are, what they've been doing all these years. Another message appeared on our phones. Good soldiers learn, better soldiers teach. The implication was clear. They'd learned from us, and now they were teaching us something in return. Teaching us about patience, about observation, about the fact that we were never really alone out here. So what do we do? Chen asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. How do we operate knowing they're out there? That they know everything about us? Before anyone could answer, a deep howl echoed from the woods. But this one was different. This one carried notes that sounded almost like radio static, like military command tones, like they were showing us just how well they'd learned our own methods of communication. The message was clear. They weren't just watching anymore. They were ready to demonstrate exactly how much they'd learned. I shouldn't have been outside the barracks that night. The new standing orders were clear. No solo movement after dark. But nicotine addiction doesn't care about orders, and I found myself stepping out for a smoke, telling myself the spotlights around the building provided enough security. I was wrong. The cigarette had barely touched my lips when I felt it. That change in air pressure that meant something massive was moving nearby. The hairs on my neck stood up, and I knew without turning that I was being watched. "Might as well show yourself," I said quietly, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "We both know you're there." The sound that answered was like a low chuckle, too human to be animal, too deep to be human. Then it stepped into the light. The leader stood less than 20 feet away, its massive form somehow more impressive up close. In the artificial light, every detail was clear. The intelligent eyes, the almost human facial features, the way it carried itself with a warrior's bearing. It was showing itself deliberately, letting me see exactly what we'd been sharing this territory with all these years. "You understand now," it seemed to say, though the words came more as impressions than actual speech. The sound was like radio static shaped into meaning, like it had learned to communicate by studying our own transmissions. "We're not in control here," I said, putting voice to the realization that had been building since our first encounter. "Never were. This is your training ground. We're just the ones you've been learning from." The creature's mouth curved in that terrifyingly human smile. It reached into what looked like a crude but effective tactical vest made from woven material, pulling out objects that made my blood run cold. A military radio handset, pieces of tactical gear, old unit patches, years of collected study materials. Learning, it conveyed somehow, the sound carrying harmonics that vibrated in my chest. Always learning, watching your wars, your tactics, your evolution. It took a step closer, moving with that impossible fluid grace. In the light, I could see scars on its massive form, evidence of its own battles, its own wars that we knew nothing about. "You teach us how to fight your way," it continued, the communication becoming clearer, as if it was learning even in this moment. "We teach you that you are not alone, not supreme, not in control." As if to demonstrate, it pulled out one final object, my own missing tactical notebook, lost months ago. It opened to a page where I'd drawn our standard patrol routes. Next to my diagrams were its own annotations, showing how easily they could intercept, observe, or avoid our movements. "How many of you are there?" I asked, though I knew it wouldn't give me a real answer. That chuffing laugh again. "Enough," it conveyed. "Enough to watch, to learn, to..." It paused, as if choosing its next concept carefully. "To maintain balance." The implications hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just studying us, they were containing us. Learning our military capabilities not just out of curiosity, but out of strategic necessity. "Smart soldier," it approved, reading my expression. "You understand. Others will learn." Or, it made a gesture that somehow combined a shrug and a threat. From the woods behind it, other forms emerged, massive shadows moving with tactical precision, taking up covering positions exactly as our own soldiers would. They weren't just mimicking us anymore. They were improving on our techniques. The leader reached out one massive hand, not quite touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from it. In the light, I could see its fingerprints, swirls and whirls, almost like human patterns, but more complex, more evolved. "You go back now," it commanded gently. "Tell others what you choose. We will continue to watch, to learn, to..." Another pause. "To prepare." For what? I had to ask, though part of me dreaded the answer. Its smile widened, showing teeth that could crush bone. "For whatever comes, your kind fights many wars. We learn from all of them, just in case." With that, it melted back into the darkness, its team disappearing with that same tactical precision. But before it vanished completely, it turned back one last time. "Remember, soldier, Darkness was ours first. We just let you borrow it sometimes. The howl that followed carried through the entire base, but this time, it contained fragments of radio protocols, tactical commands, pieces of military communication they'd learned from years of studying us. The message was clear. They weren't just observing anymore. They were mastering our own methods of warfare. As I walked back to the barracks, a text appeared on my phone despite the dead battery. Watching, learning, waiting. And somewhere in the darkness, our students had become our teachers, showing us just how much we had left to learn about who controlled these woods.
I still see her face some nights. Emily Caldwell, age 8, went missing near Tumbledown Mountain during a family camping trip. Search and rescue operations aren't supposed to end the way hers did, with me cradling what remained of a child while her parents' screams echoed through the pines. The official report said animal attack, black bear, most likely. The claw marks certainly suggested it. But bears don't arrange body parts in perfect circles. Bears don't leave handwritten notes folded into origami birds. And bears definitely don't whisper your name from the darkness 3 days after you found their supposed victim. That was 2 years ago. The incident that drove me from the Portland SR division to this backwater posting in Carabasset Valley, where the locals still use paper maps and talk about the woods like they're haunted. Turns out they might be right. My name is Mike Hutchkins, former Army Ranger, former Portland PD, current search and rescue coordinator for the Western Maine Mountain region. After Emily, I couldn't stomach the city anymore. Too many reporters, too many knowing looks. So I took the transfer, bought a cabin on the outskirts of town, and tried to forget. The locals welcomed me with the reserved politeness Mainers are famous for, neighborly but not nosy. Old Bill Crowley at the general store threw in extra hand warmers with my purchases. Sarah at the diner memorized my usual black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, sourdough toast within a week. They were good people, but they had boundaries. Don't go up past Caribou Pond after dark, Bill told me once, apropos of nothing while wringing up my thermal socks. Just good advice. I'd nodded, chalking it up to local superstition. Maine's full of old wives' tales about woods that date back to when the Abenaki thought these forests were inhabited by spirits. Quaint, I thought. Then came the Davidson incident last month. A family of 4 tourists from Massachusetts reported missing after failing to return from a day hike on the Appalachian Trail near Saddleback Mountain. Standard operation, I thought, until I found the father, Marcus Davidson, wandering barefoot through a stream, hypothermic, babbling about rules and wrong faces. 3 days later, we recovered his wife and children. What was left of them anyway. Official report, exposure and wildlife predation. The kind of thing that happens when unprepared hikers get lost. Happens all the time. Except for the matchbooks placed in each of their mouths. Except for the symbols carved into the trees surrounding them. Not trail markers, nothing I recognized. And except for the fact that when I interviewed Marcus Davidson in the hospital later, he was completely lucid. He told me something I'll never forget. There are rules in those woods, Officer Hutchkins. They gave me a list. I followed them. My family didn't. He died that night. Heart failure, the doctor said. Natural causes. The next morning, I found a sealed envelope on my front porch. No postage, no address, just my name written in flowing script that looked eerily similar to Marcus Davidson's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 7 numbered rules and a handwritten note at the bottom. You'll need these soon. The woods are waking up again. When they call for you, come prepared. I almost burned it. I should have. Instead, I folded it carefully and tucked it into my jacket pocket where it sat like a stone against my chest. 2 days later, my radio crackled at 3:17 a.m., a group of college students missing in the Bigelow Preserve. As I dressed in the dark, I felt the paper rustling in my pocket. I knew somehow that this search would be different, that I would need those rules. What I didn't know was that following them would change everything I thought I understood about these woods, about what really lives here, and about what happened to Emily Caldwell 2 years ago. My name is Mike Hutchkins, and these are the rules I follow when I search for the lost in the Maine woods. The Bigelow Preserve is beautiful in a way that makes you feel small. Ancient spruce and fir trees reaching toward the sky like cathedral spires, while Flagstaff Lake stretches out blue and vast to the north. In daylight, it's a postcard. At night, with sleep hammering down and visibility reduced to the weak cone of my flashlight, it's a maze designed to swallow people whole. I pulled my truck into the West Flagstaff Road trailhead parking lot at 4:23 a.m. 2 other vehicles were already there, Ranger Collins's green Forest Service pickup and Sheriff Wade's cruiser. Their breath clouded in the beam of my headlights as they huddled near the trailhead map. "Hutchkins," Sheriff Wade nodded as I approached. He was a squat, ruddy-faced man with 40 years of Maine winters etched into the lines around his eyes. "Got 4 missing from UMaine Farmington," he said. "Came up for some overnight stargazing on Avery Peak. Only 1 made it back." "What's their status?" I asked, pulling on my gloves. Collins handed me a steaming thermos cap of coffee. "Girl who made it back is Terry Washburn, sophomore. Hypothermic but stable. Got transported to Franklin Memorial an hour ago. Says they split up after something wrong started following them on the trail." "Wrong how?" I asked. Sheriff Wade's mouth tightened. She said it looked like Professor Kenny, but walking funny and calling to them, using their full names, which apparently the real Kenny never does. My hand drifted to my jacket pocket where the folded paper sat like a weight. The missing students, Aidan Brodery, Zoe Kim, and James Larrabee, Collins read from his notepad, plus Professor Kenny himself, last seen near Myron Avery's summit around 11 p.m. I unfolded my topographical map, tracing the most likely paths with my finger while my mind raced. The paper in my pocket seemed to grow heavier. "You 2 start up the fire warden's trail," I said. "I'll take Horns Pond route and meet you at the peak. Radio check every 30 minutes. They nodded, gathered their gear, and headed for the trailhead. I waited until their flashlights disappeared into the tree line before I pulled out the paper. The rules were written in a spidery, uneven hand. 1. If you hear your name called, count to 7 before responding. If the voice is still there, you may answer. If it's gone, keep moving. 2. Trails marked with red blazes are safe until sunrise. After that, only follow blue. 3. If you find someone wandering alone who claims to be lost, ask them what day it is. If they give the wrong answer, do not offer to help them find their way. 4. Animals should not stand perfectly still. If you see one that does, walk backwards slowly until you can no longer see it, then run. 5. If you smell wet copper and pine sap together, you have 1 minute to climb as high as you can off the ground. 6. The moon should only be visible through the trees. If you can see it clearly in a clearing, it's not the moon. Don't look directly at it. 7. If a member of your party begins walking backward or sideways, they are no longer your responsibility. Leave them immediately. I stared at the list, my breath forming ghosts in the freezing air. This was insanity. Yet, something about those rules resonated with fragments of stories I'd heard around town. Old Bill's warnings, whispers at the diner when hikers went missing, the things Marcus Davidson had said before he died. I folded the paper and tucked it back into my pocket. Then I grabbed my pack, checked my GPS, and headed up the Horns Pond Trail. The sleet had changed to snow, falling in thick, silent flakes that muffled all sound. My headlamp carved a tunnel through darkness and swirling white. The temperature had dropped below 20 degrees, dangerous conditions for lost hikers without proper gear. 2 miles in, my radio crackled. "Collins to Hutchkins, you copy?" I reached for my radio, then froze. Rule number 1 flashed through my mind. If you hear your name called, but this was Collins on a radio. I could hear the static. "Hutchkins here," I replied. "We found a backpack at the fire warden's junction. Belongs to the Kim girl. No sign of her. Over. Roger that, I'm about 2 miles in. Nothing yet. Over." I continued climbing, the trail steepening as it wound through dense spruce. The snow was falling faster now, already accumulating on the ground. Fresh powder covered any tracks the students might have left. Around 5:30 a.m., the gray light of false dawn began filtering through the trees. That's when I first heard it, a faint call from somewhere off-trail to my left. "Hello? Anyone there?" A man's voice, shaky with cold or fear. I stopped, training my light in that direction, but saw only trees and undergrowth. "This is search and rescue," I called back. "Identify yourself." "Oh, thank God," the voice replied, closer now. "It's Professor Kenny. I got separated from my students." Relief flooded through me, one found, 3 to go. I moved toward the voice, pushing through snow-laden branches. "Stay where you are, Professor. I'm coming to you." I broke through into a small clearing and spotted him, a tall, thin man in a blue parka, his back to me. "Professor Kenny?" He didn't turn, but his head cocked slightly at my voice. "You found me. Good. I need help finding my students, James, Aiden, and Zoe. We were at the summit when something strange happened." Rule 3 slithered into my mind. "Ask them what day it is." "Professor, what's today's date?" I asked. He remained motionless, still facing away. "Why does that matter? My students are missing." A chill that had nothing to do with the cold slid down my spine. "Just checking if you're oriented after being out all night," I said, keeping my voice steady while slowly reaching for my sidearm. "What's today's date?" He turned then, but stopped halfway, his face in profile. Something about the angle of his neck wasn't right. "It's the day they wake up," he said, his voice suddenly different, deeper, with an odd resonance, like multiple voices speaking together. "It's the day you learn what really happened to Emily Caldwell." My blood froze. I hadn't told anyone in Carabasset about Emily. The figure that wasn't Professor Kenny began turning the rest of the way around. I didn't wait to see its face. I ran. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping my face as panic drove me forward. Years of training told me to stop, to orient myself, but the voice that wasn't Professor Kenny's had triggered something primal in my brain, pure animal fear. After several minutes of blind running, I staggered to a stop, lungs burning in the cold air. I bent over, hands on my knees, and fought to regain control. My headlamp illuminated swirling snow and my own ragged breath clouding before me. "Get it together, Hutchkins." I pulled out my GPS. In my panic, I'd veered west off the Horns Pond Trail, not critically lost, but not where I needed to be. I took a deep breath and checked my compass to reorient. That's when I noticed the blazes on the tree beside me, bright red paint marks standing out against the bark. Rule 2. Trails marked with red blazes are safe until sunrise. After that, only follow blue. Dawn wasn't far off, maybe 20 minutes. I scanned the woods and spotted another red blaze about 30 yards ahead. Not a trail I recognized from any official map, but right now, safe sounded pretty good. I followed the red blazes at a jog, checking over my shoulder every few seconds. The marks led me on a winding path through increasingly dense forest, up a gradual incline. The snow was falling heavily now, accumulating quickly on the ground and creating a disorienting whiteout effect in my headlamp beam. After 10 minutes of following the mysterious trail, the trees suddenly thinned, and I found myself at the edge of a small clearing. In the center stood a cabin I'd never seen on any Forest Service map. A crude single-room structure with dark windows and a steeply pitched roof now blanketed in fresh snow. I approached cautiously, weapon drawn. "Hello? Search and rescue. Anyone inside?" No response. The door hung slightly ajar, a thin line of blackness separating it from the frame. I pushed it open with the barrel of my flashlight. The interior was sparse. A wood stove, a rough wooden table, a single chair, and a narrow cot against the wall. No signs of recent occupation, but no dust either. The place felt maintained. On the table lay a single item, a handheld radio, older than mine, but similar in design. I picked it up and checked the frequency. It was set to the same channel we were using for the search operation. I pressed the talk button experimentally. "This is S, Officer Hutchkins. Does anybody copy?" The radio crackled to life immediately. "Mike, thank Christ," came Sheriff Wade's voice, tight with tension. "Where are you? Collins is down. Something's out here with us. I found a cabin, I said, not on any map. What happened to Collins? Wade's voice cut off in a burst of static. When it returned, he was whispering. Something that looked like one of the missing kids approached us. Collins went to help it. Jesus, Mike, it opened up like a goddamn coat. Collins is still screaming somewhere, but I can't find him. My mouth went dry. Wade, listen to me. Ask anyone you encounter what day it is. Don't help anyone who gives the wrong answer. What are you talking about? Just trust me. I'm going to try to reach your position. Where are you? Near the summit of Avery's West Peak. But Mike, don't. His voice dissolved into static again. Outside, the first rays of true dawn were breaking through the trees, painting the snow-covered ground with pale gold light. Sunrise. I remembered Rule 2 again. Red blazes safe until sunrise, then only blue. I hurried outside and circled the cabin, searching for any blue trail markers. There, on a massive old birch about 50 yards to the north, a blue blaze faded but visible. I started toward it, then stopped dead. Something was moving through the trees to my right. A deer stepped into view about 30 yards away, a normal white-tailed deer, common in these woods. But it wasn't moving like a deer should. It stood perfectly still, facing me, even as the wind gusted and snow swirled around it. Rule 4. Animals should not stand perfectly still. If you see one that does, walk backwards slowly until you can no longer see it, then run. I began backing away, keeping my eyes on the motionless deer. Its head was too still, like a taxidermist mount. No breath steamed from its nostrils despite the freezing temperature. As I retreated, the deer's head rotated toward me, just its head, while its body remained frozen in the same position. Something about its eyes wasn't right. Too large, too dark, too aware. Once I'd backed far enough that the trees obscured my view of it, I turned and sprinted toward the blue blaze. I didn't look back until I'd reached it and found the next marker, pushing deeper into the woods, following a trail that seemed to climb steadily toward Avery Peak. The forest grew stranger as I ascended. The trees here were old, ancient really, with gnarled trunks and branches that seemed to reach for me as I passed. The snowfall had eased, but a heavy mist had taken its place, limiting visibility to about 20 yards in any direction. I checked my watch, 7:23 a.m. The students and Professor Kenny had been missing for over 8 hours now, in temperatures well below freezing. Even with proper gear, hypothermia would be setting in. I needed to find them, the real them, fast. The blue blazes led me to a stream crossing. In summer, it would have been an easy rock hop, but now the stones were slick with ice and snow. I tested each step carefully. Halfway across, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sloshing from upstream. I killed my light and crouched low on a midstream boulder. Through the mist, a figure emerged, wading down the center of the stream. It moved with a jerky, uneven gait, like someone operating a marionette without understanding how joints work. Even from a distance, I could see it wasn't right. Too tall, limbs too long, head tilted at an impossible angle. It wore what looked like standard hiking clothes, jeans, boots, a red parka, the clothing of a college student. "Hayden," I called out, immediately regretting breaking my cover. The figure stopped. Slowly, its head swiveled 180 degrees to face me, though its body still faced upstream. The face was that of a young man, maybe 20, with glasses and a patchy beard, but the expression was all wrong. Blank, like a doll's face. "You know me," it said, voice flat yet somehow surprised. "You know Aiden Broderick." I raised my weapon. "What are you?" The thing that wasn't Aiden tilted its head at an angle that would snap a human neck. "I'm learning him," it said. "Come closer, help me learn better." "Where is the real Aiden?" "Inside," it said, and its chest began to twitch and ripple beneath the parka. "Want to see?" I backed away, keeping my gun trained on it. "Where are the others, Zoe and James? The real Professor Kenny?" "All learning," it said. Its mouth stretched into a smile that extended literally from ear to ear, the skin at the corners tearing audibly. "Soon we'll all wake up. We've been sleeping so long under the mountain." "What are you talking about? What's under the mountain?" "The old ones, the hollow people, the long hunger." It took a jerky step toward me. We need to practice being you. It's been so long since we walked outside. I fired a warning shot into the air. Stay back. The thing stopped, head cocking at an impossible angle. Bullets don't work on borrowed skin, Mike Hutchkins. We know this. We tried with Emily Caldwell. My blood ran cold. What do you know about Emily? She was delicious, it said, smile widening impossibly. Her fear was so bright, like yours is now. Its chest began to split open, the parka tearing as something dark and glistening pushed through from inside. The smell hit me then. Wet copper and pine sap, overwhelming and immediate. Rule 5. If you smell wet copper and pine sap together, you have 1 minute to climb as high as you can off the ground. I scrambled backward, nearly losing my footing on the icy rocks, and leapt for the shore. My mind raced. There were no tall rocks nearby, no easy climbing trees within reach. The thing in the stream let out a noise that wasn't quite a laugh as its chest continued to split open, revealing a mass of writhing darkness inside the shell of Aiden Broderick. Desperate, I ran to the largest tree nearby, an ancient pine with low, sturdy branches, and began to climb as fast as I could, my boots slipping on the snow-covered bark. Below me, I heard the wet, slithering sound of something large dragging itself out of the stream. I didn't look down. I just climbed, branches tearing at my clothes, bark scraping my hands raw. I climbed until my muscles screamed, until I was 30 feet above the ground with nowhere higher to go, the upper branches too thin to support my weight. Only then did I look down. What I saw still haunts me. At the base of the tree stood what remained of Aiden Broderick, or rather the shell that had been wearing his skin. The red parka lay in tatters around a glistening mass that pulsed and shifted like oil in water. It had no definite shape, flowing and reforming constantly, but somehow maintaining a vaguely humanoid silhouette. From its surface, dozens of thin, whip-like tendrils extended outward, probing the snow and trees around it. The thing that had emerged from Aiden's skin had no face that I could discern, but it seemed to sense me nonetheless. It circled the tree slowly, tendrils reaching upward but falling well short of my position. After several minutes of this strange patrol, it shuddered violently, collapsing in on itself until it was half its previous size. Then, with a sound like wet leather stretching, it began to change. Bones formed within the oily mass, human bones assembling into a skeleton before my eyes. Organs bloomed around them, followed by muscle and sinew. It was building a body from scratch, constructing a human form like someone following an instruction manual without understanding the purpose. Last came the skin, flowing over the newly formed body like paint. When it finished, a perfect replica of Aiden Broderick stood at the base of my tree, fully clothed in the reconstituted remains of his hiking gear. Only his eyes were wrong, totally black without whites or irises. Better, it said in Aiden's voice, more natural sounding than before. I'm learning. I remained frozen in the tree, my hands cramping from their death grip on the icy branches. My service weapon was still holstered at my hip, but the thing had already told me bullets wouldn't work. What do you want? I managed to ask, my voice barely steady. The Aiden thing tilted its head, the movement more fluid than before. To wake up, to walk again, to feed, it said, gesturing at the surrounding forest. This was hours before your kind came. The Wabanaki knew. They stayed away from the Hollow Mountains. The Hollow Mountains? I repeated. You mean Bigelow? Avery Peak? It nodded, a small pleased smile forming on its stolen face. You're smarter than the others, my Hutchkins. Yes, we sleep inside, but sometimes we wake, when the stars align, when the doors between thin, when blood is spilled in the right places. Like Emily Caldwell, I said, the pieces clicking together. Someone killed her as a sacrifice. The thing grinned wider. The old man who lives in the yellow house, he knows the old ways. He gave us the girl. Now he's giving us more. It pointed roughly southeast. The others are there. The gathering place. The door is almost open. A cold certainty settled in my gut. Bill Crowley, the general store owner. The Aiden thing didn't confirm or deny, just continued smiling that too perfect smile. I thought quickly, if this thing wanted me dead, it could probably reach me regardless of how high I climbed. It was talking to me for a reason. Why are you telling me this? Its black eyes blinked slowly. Because you have a choice to make, Mike Hutchkins. Help us or join us. The old man promised us bodies, young, strong bodies to learn from. But you could be more. You could be a guide. A guide to what? To the others, to the easy prey. It gestured vaguely toward Carabasset Valley. Show us how they think, how they move, how they hide. Help us hunt. The offer turned my stomach. And if I refuse? The thing's face hardened, the smile vanishing. Then you're just food, like Emily Caldwell, like the students. It paused, head tilting. Time's up. Decision now. My mind raced. I needed to buy time to find a way out of this impala situation. I need to see them first, I said. The students, Professor Kenny. If they're still alive, I want to see them. The Aiden thing considered this for a long moment, its black eyes unblinking. Then it nodded. Follow, it said, turning and walking into the forest without looking back. I hesitated, then slowly descended from the tree. Every instinct screamed at me to run in the opposite direction, but I couldn't abandon the missing students if there was any chance still alive. They were still alive. And I needed to know what Bill Crowley had done. The thing that wore Aiden's skin moved with unnatural grace through the forest, following a route that didn't correspond to any trail on my map. I checked my GPS. We were heading east toward the saddle between Avery and West Peak. The snow had stopped entirely, leaving behind a pristine white blanket that made tracking our passage trivially easy. If anyone was looking for us, they'd have no trouble following. If anyone was still looking. The thought of Sheriff Wade and what might have happened to him after our radio contact went dark weighed heavily on me. After 20 minutes of silent hiking, we reached a small, sheltered basin between the two peaks. In the center of the natural depression stood a circle of stones, not random boulders, but deliberately placed, weathered megaliths that looked impossibly ancient. They reminded me of smaller versions of Stonehenge, worn by centuries of Maine winters. The doorway, the Aiden thing said, gesturing to the stone circle. The old people knew. They built it to keep us in. Now it lets us out. Within the circle, 3 figures knelt in the snow, backs to us. Even from behind, I recognized the distinctive purple jacket Zoe Kim had been described as wearing, and the lanky frame of who I assumed was James Larrabee. The third, larger figure would be Professor Kenny. Are they alive? I asked, taking a step closer. For now. The Aiden thing's voice had changed subtly, a strange resonance underlying the human tones. The door needs life to open fully. Blood keeps it from closing. I moved closer, circling to see their faces. What I saw nearly stopped my heart. All 3 knelt in identical postures, eyes open but vacant, expressions slack. From their slightly parted lips, thin, translucent filaments extended, connecting them to the ground at the center of the stone circle. The filaments pulsed rhythmically, and with each pulse, the kneeling figures twitched slightly, synchronized like puppets. Where the filaments entered the ground, the snow had melted in a perfect circle, revealing dark, rich soil that seemed to breathe, rising and falling in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. What are you doing to them? I asked, unable to mask the horror in my voice. Drinking, the Aiden thing said simply. Their fear, their memories, their essence. We need to understand before we can wear them properly. I reached for my sidearm, but the Aiden thing moved with blinding speed, catching my wrist in a grip that felt like iron. No, it chided. I told you, bullets don't work on borrowed skin. Let them go, I demanded. They're innocent. Nothing is innocent, it replied. The old man understood why a few lives for the safety of many, that was the bargain the first people made. A few sacrifices to keep us sleeping. He's just honoring the old ways. A few sacrifices like Emily Caldwell, like these students. My free hand went to my pocket, fingers brushing the paper with the rules. I needed a way out, a way to save these people. Suddenly, a distant cry echoed through the basin. Human, terrified, familiar. Sheriff Wade. The Aiden thing's head snapped toward the sound. Its face rippled, momentarily losing cohesion before reforming. Others come, unexpected. It released my wrist and strode to the edge of the stone circle, head cocked as if listening. I used the moment to move closer to the kneeling students, examining the filaments connecting them to the breathing ground. They looked almost like spider silk, glistening with moisture but pulsing with an internal light that shifted from blue to green to purple. On impulse, I reached for my knife. If these things were feeding on the students through these connections, perhaps severing them would free them. Before I could draw my blade, the Aiden thing whirled back toward me. No! It hissed, moving with that unnatural speed again. But this time, I was ready, sidestepping its lunge and drawing my knife in one fluid motion. I slashed at the nearest filament, the one extending from Professor Kenny's mouth. The knife passed through it like it was made of air, having no effect whatsoever. The Aiden thing laughed, a horrible sound that echoed wrongly in the basin. Physical tools can't touch the threads of consciousness, Mike Hutchkins. Only blood freely given can break the connection. My mind raced back to the rules. There had to be something, some clue about how to fight these things. The distant cry came again, closer now. The Aiden thing's expression darkened. "Time's up," it said. "Choose now, guide us or join them." I looked at the kneeling figures, their life literally being drained away into the earth. I thought about Emily Caldwell and the horrific way she died. I thought about Bill Crowley selling out tourists and strangers to feed these ancient horrors. "I'll help you," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The Aiden thing's face split in that too-wide smile again. "Good choice. First lesson starts now. Tell us about the one who comes, the loud one." "Sheriff Wade," I said, playing for time. "He's armed, dangerous, but he trusts me. I can bring him to you." The thing nodded approvingly. "Go, bring him. We'll prepare a place for him in the circle." I turned as if to leave the basin, my mind frantically searching for a plan. I couldn't abandon these people, but I had no idea how to fight these creatures or free their victims. As I reached the edge of the basin, I glanced up at the sky through a break in the trees. I could see the full moon, impossibly large and bright against the morning sky. Wait, full moon? In broad daylight? Rule 6 flashed through my mind. The moon should only be visible through the trees. If you can see it clearly in a clearing, it's not the moon. Don't look directly at it. Too late. I realized my mistake. I'd looked directly at the false moon and a wave of dizziness immediately washed over me. The world tilted sideways, colors inverting briefly before snapping back to normal. When my vision cleared, I wasn't standing at the edge of the basin anymore. I was kneeling inside the stone circle, a slick, transparent filament extending from my own mouth into the breathing earth below. I couldn't move, not my arms, not my legs, not even my eyes. My body had become a prison, my mind the only thing still free. Panic surged through me, but even that remained trapped within, even that unable to manifest as increased breathing or racing heart. I was frozen, a living statue. The filament extending from my mouth pulsed with sickly light. With each throb, I felt memories being pulled from me. My childhood in Augusta, my military service, Emily Caldwell's death, each extracted like teeth from unwilling gums. The pain wasn't physical, but something deeper, more fundamental. These things were drinking my essence, my very self. The Aiden thing sauntered into my field of vision, that horrible smile still plastered across its stolen face. "See? Much easier this way. No need to convince you now." It crouched down, bringing its face level with mine. "Your memories taste interesting. So much guilt, so much fear. Delicious." Behind it, the ground in the center of the stone circle continued to rise and fall like breathing lungs. With each exhalation, a fine mist of crystalline particles floated upward, hovering momentarily before being drawn back down. It reminded me of underwater footage I'd seen of sea anemones feeding on microscopic organisms. The Aiden thing stood and walked to the edge of the circle, tilting its head as if listening. "Your friend comes closer. The loud one, his fear precedes him. Sheriff Wade. If he walked into this clearing unprepared, he'd end up just like us." I strained against my invisible bonds, fighting with everything I had to move, to shout a warning. Nothing happened. "Don't waste energy," the Aiden thing said without turning. "The connection is complete. Only blood freely given can break it now." It paused, head cocking further. He brings others. Many footsteps. Others. A rescue party. My hopes rose marginally. Then again, what could ordinary search and rescue personnel do against these things? The Aiden thing seemed unconcerned. It returned to the center of the circle and knelt beside the breathing earth, placing one hand on the soil. It began to speak in a language I'd never heard, guttural sounds interspersed with clicks and whistles no human throat could produce. The breathing ground responded, its rhythm increasing. The filaments connecting us to it pulsed faster, and with each pulse, more memories were torn away. I felt myself growing hollow, pieces of my identity vanishing one by one. A sound like cracking ice emanated from beneath us. The soil at the center of the circle split, revealing a narrow fissure that widened steadily. From within the growing crack, a thick gray mist began to rise. Not like normal fog, but something that moved with purpose, coiling and reaching like tentative fingers. The door opens, the Aiden thing said, switching back to English. The sleepers wake. The mist continued to pour from the fissure, pooling around our kneeling forms. Where it touched exposed skin, it left behind a crystalline residue that sparkled in the morning light. The sensation was like thousands of tiny needles pricking my flesh, but even this pain remained trapped inside my paralyzed body. Voices approached from beyond the basin, Sheriff Wade's distinctive baritone plus others I didn't recognize. The Aiden thing hissed in annoyance. "Too soon," it muttered. "The door is not fully open." It stood and circled us, its movements becoming more erratic, less human. The stolen face of Aiden Broderick began to ripple and shift as its concentration wavered. "Hide," it decided, gesturing toward the mist. Immediately the gray fog thickened, rising until it obscured everything within the stone circle from outside view. Through the swirling mist, I saw Sheriff Wade enter the basin, accompanied by 4 forest rangers in their distinctive green uniforms. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn, sweeping the area with tactical precision. "Hutchkins!" Wade called. "Collins! You out here?" The Aiden thing smiled that terrible smile. It raised one hand and the mist parted slightly, just enough to give the search party a clear view of us kneeling in the circle. "Help!" it called in a perfect imitation of my voice. "Over here! I found them!" Wade and the rangers turned toward the sound, squinting through the mist. "Hutchkins? Is that you?" The trap was set. Once they entered the circle, they'd be taken just like us. I fought desperately against my paralysis, focusing every ounce of willpower on moving something, anything, a finger, an eyelid, my lips. And then I remembered Rule 1. If you hear your name called, count to 7 before responding. If the voice is still there, you may answer. If it's gone, keep moving. Wade was cautious by nature. He knew these woods and their dangers. If he followed that rule, even unconsciously, "Hutchkins," he called again, taking a tentative step forward. 1. The Aiden thing smiled wider, gesturing for the mist to part further. 2. Wade and 2 rangers moved closer while the other 2 rangers circled to the left and right, standard search and rescue protocol. 3. "Hurry," the Aiden thing called with my voice. "They're alive, but fading fast." 4. Wade paused, something like suspicion crossing his weathered face. "Mike, what's your status?" 5. The fissure in the center of the circle widened further. The mist was thickening, solidifying into forms that were almost humanoid but wrong. Too tall, too thin, limbs at impossible angles. 6. "Mike," Wade called again, taking a step back. "Report." 7. The Aiden thing's smile faltered. "We found the missing students," it called, still using my voice. "Need medical assistance immediately." But Wade was already backing away, raising his hand to signal the rangers to hold position. "That's not Mike," he said quietly, but in the unnatural stillness of the basin, his words carried clearly. "Mike always reports status first, then situation." The Aiden thing hissed in frustration, its face rippling violently, features melting and reforming. "Too late," it growled, its voice now a distorted version of Aiden's. "The door opens. The sleepers wake." The fissure in the earth tore wider with a sound like mountains splitting. The gray mist erupted upward in a geyser of writhing tendrils. Where they touched the stone megaliths, frost formed instantly, spreading in crystalline patterns. "Fall back!" Wade shouted to the Rangers. "Get out of the basin!" Too late. The mist surged forward with impossible speed, engulfing two of the Rangers before they could retreat. Their screams cut off abruptly as they vanished within the gray cloud. Wade and the remaining Rangers opened fire, bullets cutting through the mist without effect. The Aiden thing laughed, the sound echoing wrongly. "Physical weapons cannot harm us," it declared. "We are the hollow ones. We are hunger given form." As the mist advanced on Wade and the remaining Rangers, something unexpected happened. A bright orange flare arced through the air, launched from somewhere beyond the basin's edge. It landed in the center of the stone circle, directly in the widening fissure. The reaction was immediate and violent. The mist recoiled as if burned, tendrils writhing in what could only be pain. The fissure began to close, edges of soil drawing together. A second flare followed, then a third, each landing within the circle and burning with unnatural intensity. The mist retreated further, condensing around us, the kneeling sacrifices. Someone new entered the basin, a small elderly woman with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a park ranger's uniform that looked decades out of date and carried a shotgun that appeared almost as old as she was. "Iron and fire," she shouted to Wade. "They hate iron and fire. Drive them back to the circle." Wade didn't question. He grabbed something from his belt, road flares, and with them, tossing them in a perimeter around the stone circle. The remaining Rangers followed suit, creating a ring of blazing red light. The gray mist shrieked, a sound no fog should be able to make, and pulled back entirely into the stone circle, condensing around our kneeling forms. The old woman approached the edge of the circle, stopping just outside the stones. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a handful of what looked like iron nails, rusted with age. "Blood freely given breaks the bond," she said, looking directly at me. "Remember the rules, Officer Hutchkins." Blood freely given. Rule 5 had mentioned climbing when snowing copper and pine. Rule 3 warned about helping the lost who didn't know the date, but nothing specifically about blood unless the paper itself, the rules that had appeared mysteriously on my porch after Marcus Davidson's death, unless the note had been signed in what looked like blood. The old woman began tossing iron nails into the circle one by one. Where they landed, the mist hissed and retreated. The Aiden thing's face contorted in rage. "Ranger Catherine," it snarled, "still interfering after all these years." 58 years, the old woman, Catherine, corrected grimly. 58 years protecting these mountains from your kind. Did you think I'd stop now? The Aiden thing circled us like a predator, its movements growing increasingly frantic as more iron nails landed within the stone circle. The gray mist continued to retreat, condensing around the fissure at the center. "You can't stop it this time, Catherine," the thing snarled, its voice fluctuating between Aiden's and something much older, much deeper. "The alignment is perfect. The sacrifices are ready. The door is opening." Ranger Catherine moved slowly around the perimeter of the circle, careful not to cross the boundary marked by the standing stones. Her eyes, sharp despite her years, never left the Aiden thing. "I've stopped it before. I'll stop it again," she said. She tossed another nail into the circle. "Bill Crowley should have known better," she added. "Should have remembered what happened in 67. The Aiden thing hissed. "The old man serves us now," it said. "Has served us for decades. Did you think you were the only one who remembered?" While they faced off, Sheriff Wade and the two remaining Rangers had positioned themselves around the circle, creating a perimeter with their flares. The bright chemical light pushed the mist further back, confining it entirely within the stone boundary. "Catherine," Wade called, never taking his eyes off the scene. "What the hell are we dealing with?" "The hollow ones," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her stance. "They live inside the mountains, sleep for decades, sometimes centuries, wake up hungry. Like skinwalkers?" one of the Rangers asked, his voice trembling slightly. Catherine shook her head. "Worse. Skinwalkers were once human, at least. These never were." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small glass vial containing what looked like dark, dried blood. They're what the Wabanaki called the Winnegan, the Hollow Hunters. They wear bodies like we wear clothes, discarding them when they are damaged or no longer useful. The Aiden thing laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. Such knowledge for a human. Did your grandfather teach you that before we took him, Catherine Blackwell? A flash of pain crossed the old woman's face, but her hand remained steady as she uncorked the vial. My grandfather died protecting these mountains from you, she said. I'm just continuing the family business. Inside the circle, I remained paralyzed, a helpless witness to the confrontation. The filament connecting me to the breathing earth continued to pulse, but slower now, as if the entities were diverting their attention to the more immediate threat. I could feel my sense of self eroding with each pulse, memories being consumed and digested by whatever lurked below. The students beside me were in worse shape. Zoe's eyes had clouded over completely, turning milky white. James had begun to twitch uncontrollably, his body fighting the paralysis even as his consciousness was being devoured. Only Professor Kenny seemed relatively intact, though his skin had taken on an ashen pallor. Catherine circled until she stood directly across from Wade. Their positions, Catherine, Wade, and the two rangers, formed a rough square around the stone circle. The old woman raised the vial. "Remember the rules, Officer Hutchkins," she called to me. "Blood freely given breaks the bond. Iron contains. Fire repels. What cannot be killed can be bound." The Aiden thing suddenly lunged toward Catherine, moving with that unnatural speed. It stopped abruptly at the circle's edge as if hitting an invisible barrier. It screamed in frustration, its face melting and reforming rapidly. "You think your perimeter will hold?" it sneered. The doorway widens. More come. As if in response to its words, the fissure at the center of the circle cracked wider. The gray mist swirled more violently, and within it shapes began to form. Tall, spindly silhouettes with too many limbs, moving with the jerky, disjointed motions of poorly operated marionettes. Catherine locked eyes with Wade. "When I give the signal, throw everything you've got into the circle. Every flare, every iron nail, every silver coin you're carrying. Anything metal. Understand?" Wade nodded grimly. Catherine turned to me. "And you, Officer Hutchkins, when you feel the pull lessen, you need to move fast and you need to get the others out of the circle if you can, but don't hesitate. Don't look back." She began to chant in a language I didn't recognize. Not the guttural sounds the Aiden thing had used, but something more melodic, flowing like water over stones. With each phrase, she sprinkled droplets from the vial onto the ground just outside the circle. The effect was immediate. The earth where the blood, if that's what it was, touched began to glow with a soft amber light. The light spread, tracing the circumference of the circle, connecting the standing stones with a luminous thread. The Aiden thing howled, its form destabilizing further. The stolen face of Aiden Brick sloved away like melting wax, revealing the pulsing, oily darkness beneath. "Your blood is weak, Catherine Blackwell. Too old. Too thin." "Not my blood," Catherine replied, a grim smile tugging at her weathered face. "My grandfather's, preserved with salt and iron for just this purpose." The amber light completed its circuit around the circle, flaring brighter. Within the circle, the gray mist retreated further from the perimeter, condensing into a churning column above the fissure. The partially formed shapes within it writhed in what looked like pain. The filament connecting me to the earth faltered, its pulsing growing erratic. I felt a lessening of the paralysis, a tingling returning to my extremities. "Now!" Catherine shouted. Wade and the Rangers began hurling their remaining flares into the circle. At the same time, Catherine flung the last of the blood from the vial directly at of mist. The world exploded into chaos. A howl like 1,000 tortured voices filled the basin, echoing off the mountainsides. The column of mist convulsed violently, tendrils lashing outward in all directions. The flares ignited something within the mist itself, setting off chemical reactions that painted the scene in strobing blues and greens. In that moment of confusion, I felt the paralysis break entirely. The filament connecting me to the breathing earth snapped with an audible pop, dissolving into shimmering particles. I collapsed forward, catching myself on hands suddenly alive with pins and needles sensation. "Move!" Catherine's voice cut through the cacophony. "Get out of the circle!" I scrambled to my feet, legs shaky but responsive. To my left, Professor Kenny also stirred, the filament connecting him having broken as well, but Zoe and James remained kneeling, still connected, still being drained. A decision point. Catherine had said to get out, not to look back. But I couldn't leave the students. I lunged for Zoe first, grabbing her around the waist and pulling backward with all my strength. For a moment, nothing happened. It was like trying to move a statue anchored to the ground. Then something gave way, and we both tumbled backward. The filament stretched thin, then snapped, dissolving like mine had. The column of mist shrieked again, a sound that made my teeth vibrate in my skull. Tendrils shot from it, whipping toward us with vicious intent. "Hutchkins, move!" Wade shouted, firing his service weapon into the mass of mist. The bullets passed through harmlessly, but the mist recoiled slightly from the sound. I dragged Zoe toward the edge of the circle, her body limp but breathing. Professor Kenny had already made it out, helped by one of the rangers. That left James. I turned back. The tendrils of mist had wrapped around James entirely now, his form barely visible within the writhing gray mass. The Aiden thing, or what remained of it, had melted back into the central column, its borrowed humanity completely abandoned. Catherine appeared at my side, her ancient shotgun leveled at the column. "Too late for that one," she said grimly. "Get out while you can." The fissure in the earth was closing now, the edges drawing together like a healing wound. The column of mist compressed, darkening to the color of a storm cloud. Lightning-like discharges crackled within it. "It's retreating," Catherine said, satisfaction evident in her voice, falling back into the deep places. But the battle wasn't over. As the fissure narrowed, the mist grew more frantic. Tendrils shot out in every direction, seeking escape. One wrapped around my ankle before I could react, burning cold even through my boot. I cried out, trying to shake it off. Catherine didn't hesitate. She aimed her shotgun and fired directly at the tendril. Instead of buckshot, the shell discharged what looked like iron filings glittering in the morning light. Where they struck the tendril, it sizzled and released me, retreating back to the main mass. "Iron and salt," Catherine explained, reloading with practiced efficiency. "Oldest remedy there is." The fissure had narrowed to a crack now, and the column of mist was being drawn into it like water down a drain. The howling had faded to a low, angry hum that vibrated in my chest. The Aiden thing was nowhere to be seen, presumably reabsorbed into the greater mass, but James still knelt at the center, the filament connecting him now thicker than before, pulsing with dark energy. His body jerked and twitched, head lolling unnaturally. "We can't leave him," I insisted, moving back toward the circle. Catherine caught my arm in a surprisingly strong grip. "Look at his eyes." I did. James's eyes had turned completely black, like pools of oil, and when his head turned toward us, the movement was all wrong. Fluid but unnatural, like a snake rather than a human neck. "That's not James anymore," Catherine said softly. "They've hollowed him out." As if confirming her assessment, James's body rose to its feet with jerky, marionette-like movements. His head tilted at an impossible angle, and when his mouth opened, the voice that emerged was not human. "We will return," it said in a chorus of overlapping tones. "The door is marked. The key is turned. Next time, Catherine Blackwell, you won't be here to stop us." The remaining gray mist swirled around him, encasing him in a cocoon of writhing tendrils. When it dissipated seconds later, both James and the mist were gone. The fissure sealed completely beneath undisturbed soil. The stone circle stood empty, save for the scattered flares still sputtering on the ground. The oppressive atmosphere that had permeated the basin lifted, replaced by the normal sounds of the forest. Wind through pine needles, distant bird calls, the crunch of snow underfoot. Catherine lowered her shotgun, shoulders sagging with either relief or exhaustion. Probably both. "It's over. For now." Wade approached cautiously, keeping his weapon at the ready. Would someone like to explain what the hell just happened? Later, Catherine said, turning toward where the Rangers were tending to Zoe and Professor Kenny. First, we need to get these two to safety. And then her eyes hardened as she looked at me. We need to pay a visit to Bill Crowley. I nodded, my mind still reeling from everything I'd witnessed. The rules, I said, pulling the crumpled paper from my pocket. You wrote them, didn't you? Catherine's weathered face broke into a tired smile. Not me. My grandfather. I just made sure they find their way to those who need them. She nodded toward the paper. Keep that close. We're not done yet. Not by a long shot. I looked back at the stone circle one last time. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement within it, a gray shadow passing between the stones. But when I blinked, it was gone. As we carried the survivors out of the basin, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we'd encountered, the Winogan, the Hollow Ones, were merely retreating, not defeated. And somewhere in the depths of the mountain, James was with them, or whatever remained of him. The rules had saved us this time. I had a feeling we'd need them again soon. The ride back to Carabasset Valley passed in weighted silence. I sat in Wade's cruiser, Catherine beside me in the back seat. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, delayed shock setting in as the adrenaline ebbed from my system. Professor Kenny and Zoe had been airlifted to Franklin Memorial Hospital, both still unconscious but stable. We need a plan, Wade finally said, breaking the silence as we descended into the valley. I can't just walk into Crowley's store and arrest him for what? Exactly? Sacrificing hikers to mountain monsters? Catherine made a sound that might have been a laugh if it contained any humor. No one's arrested a Crowley in this valley for 3 generations. They're protected. Protected by who? I asked. By what did? The Hollow Ones have been sleeping under these mountains for centuries. The original settlers made a pact, sacrifices in exchange for safety. The Crowleys have been the keepers of that pact since the beginning. Wade's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. So we're talking about generations of murders covered up by the whole town? Not the whole town, Catherine said. Most folks around here don't know the specifics. They just know certain places are dangerous after dark, certain trails you don't take, certain rules you follow. The cruiser slowed as we approached the outskirts of town. And your family? I asked. Where do you fit in? Catherine's weathered face hardened. We were the opposition. The Blackwells never accepted the pact. We've been fighting it since my great-grandfather's time, finding ways to bind the Hollow Ones to keep them sleeping. She patted the shotgun across her knees. Every generation, one of us takes up the watch. And no one stopped the Crowleys before now? She shook her head. Can't prove what happens in the deep woods. Bodies get blamed on animal attacks, exposure, accidents, and the benefits are too good. Benefits? Wade asked. Prosperity, protection. Carabasset Valley hasn't had a major natural disaster in 150 years. No floods, no devastating fires, no disease outbreaks. Even the big blizzard of '52 somehow skipped right over us. Her eyes had a distant look. The pact works in its way. That's why it's continued. We pulled into town just after noon. Main Street was quiet, a few locals going about their business under the weak winter sun. Crowley's general store sat at the far end, a weathered clapboard building with a hand-painted sign and an American flag hanging limply in the still air. What's our move? Wade asked, parking across the street. Catherine checked her shotgun. We confront him. Make him understand the Hollow Ones are getting stronger. The old sacrifices aren't enough anymore. They want to wake fully, to walk outside their mountains. And if he doesn't cooperate? I asked. Her eyes met mine, hard as flint. Then we end a very old arrangement. Wade frowned. I can't condone vigilante justice, Catherine. This isn't about justice, she replied. It's about survival. We crossed the street together, an unlikely trio. The sheriff in his mud-spattered uniform, the ancient ranger with her even more ancient shotgun, and me, still wearing the torn and bloodied clothes from my encounter in the stone circle. A bell jingled cheerfully as we entered. The store's interior was dimly lit and smelled of leather, coffee, and wood smoke. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from canned goods to fishing tackle to homemade jams. At the back, a pot-bellied stove radiated welcome heat. Behind the counter stood Bill Crowley himself, wiping down the ancient cash register. He looked up as we entered, his friendly shopkeeper's smile fading as he registered who had come calling. "Catherine," he said, voice carefully neutral. "Been a while." "Not long enough, Bill." Catherine's shotgun wasn't raised, but she made no effort to conceal it. Crawley's eyes flicked to Wade, then to me, lingering on my torn jacket and the dried blood on my hands. "I see you've met our visitors, Officer Hutchkins. The hollow ones," I said. "Yeah, we got acquainted right after they tried to drain me dry in your little stone circle." Something like genuine regret crossed Crowley's face. "You weren't supposed to be involved. Just the students, outsiders, nobody who'd be missed around here." Wade stepped forward, hand resting on his sidearm. "William Crowley, I should arrest you right now for the disappearance of James Larrabee and attempted murder of Zoe Kim and Professor Kenny." Crowley's smile returned, sad and knowing. "On what evidence, Sheriff? You really want to start that process? Ask yourself how many of your predecessors knew about the arrangement. Ask yourself why nobody's interfered all these years." Wade's jaw tightened, but he didn't draw his weapon. Crowley turned to Catherine. "It has to be done. You know that better than anyone. The hollow ones must be fed or they wake hungry. Would you rather sacrifice a few strangers or watch them hollow out the entire valley?" "There were alternatives," Catherine snapped. "My family found ways to keep them bound without blood." "Your family chose the easy way, the effective way," Crowley corrected. "Your grandfather's binding wore off. Always does. Blood is the only permanent solution." I stepped closer to the counter. "Tell me about Emily Caldwell." Something flickered behind Crowley's eyes. Caution, maybe even fear. "What about her?" The thing wearing Aiden Brick's skin said she was delicious, said her fear was bright. My voice remained steady, though my hands curled into fists. It said you gave her to them. Crowley's shoulders slumped slightly. "I didn't choose her specifically. Sometimes they have preferences. Children's fear is stronger, purer, it sustains them longer." The admission hit me like a physical blow. I surged forward, grabbing him by his flannel shirt. "You son of a! She was 8 years old!" Wade pulled me back while Crowley adjusted his collar, unfazed. "I take no pleasure in it, Officer Hutchkins, but the arrangement must be maintained. One child every few years means hundreds survive. The math is simple." "And Marcus Davidson?" I asked. "The father who survived while his family died?" Crowley nodded. "Sometimes they like to leave one alive, a witness no one will believe. It amuses them." He gestured to Catherine. "Ask her. She knows their ways better than anyone." "The alignment is stronger this year," Catherine said, ignoring his deflection. "You felt it too, didn't you? That's why you escalated from 1 victim to 4. Crowley didn't deny it. "The stars are right. The door wants to open wider than before." "They took James Larrabee completely," I said. "They're wearing him now, learning from him." The hollow one said, "Next time they'll be ready." For the first time, genuine alarm showed on Crowley's face. "Took him completely?" He shook his head. "That's never happened before. They've always just fed and retreated." "Things are changing, Bill," Catherine said. "The old arrangement isn't working anymore. They're getting stronger, more ambitious." Crowley moved from behind the counter, pacing nervously. "That's not possible. My grandfather spoke with them directly, made the terms clear. Blood for protection. They never take more than agreed upon." "Well, they just did," Wade said flatly, "and they nearly took Officer Hutchkins and 2 others with them." Crowley stopped pacing, his face suddenly ashen. "If they're breaking the arrangement—" He didn't finish the thought, but fear had replaced his earlier confidence. Catherine stepped forward. "We need to reinforce the bindings. All of them. Every circle, every doorway on the mountain." "There are more stone circles?" I asked. 7 in total, Crowley confirmed. 1 for each peak in the Bigelow Range. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "If they're truly waking, truly breaking the arrangement, Then we're all in danger. The bell above the door jingled again. We all turned to see Sarah from the diner entering, a covered dish in her hands. "Brought you some of that apple cobbler you like, Bill," she said cheerfully, then froze as she registered the tension in the room. "Everything okay here?" Crowley forced a smile. "Just fine, Sarah. Sheriff's asking about some missing hikers." Sarah nodded, setting the dish on the counter. "Those college kids?" Her eyes found mine. "Heard you were up on the mountain all night searching, Mike. Any luck?" "Sarah, how long have you lived in the valley?" Sarah blinked at the non sequitur. "Born and raised. Blackwell." "You used to run the Eastern Ranger Station?" "Still do," Sarah said. "Tell me, have you noticed anything strange lately? Unusual animal behavior? People acting odd?" Sarah's friendly expression faltered slightly. "Well, now that you mention it, old Jenkins's dog won't go near the tree line anymore. Just sits and howls if they try to walk him up there. And my nephew said he saw someone walking backward through the playground at night last week. I told him it was just his imagination, but..." Rule 7 flashed through my mind. If a member of your party begins walking backward or sideways, they are no longer your responsibility. Leave them immediately. Crowley and Catherine exchanged significant looks. It's starting already," Catherine said quietly. Crowley nodded, any pretense of denial gone. "They're pushing at the boundaries," Wade said. "Testing." "Testing for what?" I asked. "Full awakening," Catherine said grimly. "They don't want sacrifices anymore. They want to hunt freely again, like they did before the settlers, before the Wabanaki, before anyone lived in these valleys." Sarah looked between us, confusion evident. "What are y'all talking about?" Crowley made a decision. He moved to the door, flipped the open sign to closed, and locked it. "Sarah, you might want to sit down. There are some things about this town you need to understand." "We don't have time for a history lesson," Catherine objected. "The bindings need to be reinforced before nightfall." "She needs to know," Crowley insisted. "Everyone in town needs to know. If the Hollow Ones are breaking the arrangement, no one is safe anymore." He turned to me. "Officer Hutchkins, did you bring the rules with you?" I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket. "Right here." "Good," Crowley said, eyes deadly serious. "You're going to need them. We all are." Outside the window, the afternoon sun slipped behind a bank of clouds, casting the street in premature shadow. In the distance, toward the mountains, a thin gray mist was rising, though there wasn't a hint of rain in the forecast. "It's beginning," Catherine whispered. Bill Crowley's back room could have belonged to a museum of local history or a paranormal investigator's office. Shelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound journals dating back to the 1800s. Maps covered one wall, the Bigelow Range marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Glass cases displayed artifacts, stone arrowheads, iron nails with strange markings, vials of dark substances. "The family archive," Crowley explained, pulling a dusty tome from a shelf. "Every Crowley for 7 generations has kept records," Catherine snorted. "Records of your betrayals. Records of our survival," Crowley countered without heat. "Not all of us had the luxury of moral high ground, Catherine. Some of us had to make the hard choices." Sheriff Wade was on his radio, coordinating with his deputies to quietly gather the town council for an emergency meeting. Sarah sat in a corner chair, her face pale but composed as she processed everything she'd just learned about her hometown. "So all those missing hikers over the years?" Sarah said quietly. "Not all were sacrifices," Crowley clarified, spreading a map on the table. "The mountains are dangerous in ordinary ways too, but yes, some were chosen." "By you," I said, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. Crowley met my gaze. "I marked them, left signs the Hollow Ones recognized. I never physically harmed anyone myself." "That's a distinction without a difference," Wade growled, rejoining us after finishing his call. "Perhaps," Crowley conceded, "but it kept this town safe for decades." He tapped the map. "These are the 7 circles. Avery Peak, where you encountered them today. Old Speck, Sugarloaf, Crocker Mountain, Bigelow Mountain, and 2 more on unnamed peaks that don't appear on official maps." Catherine leaned over the table. "The Wabanaki called them the 7 Teeth. the places where the earth opens to what lies beneath. She traced a line connecting the peaks together. They form a containment boundary. As long as the circles are maintained, the hollow ones stay inside their territory. And when the circles fail, Iathrin's face was grim. 1797, the Rangeley incident. 3 entire settlements disappeared in a single night. The survivors spoke of people walking wrong, of mists that followed them, of neighbors who weren't quite right anymore. She nodded toward the bookshelves. It's all in the records, isn't it, Bill? Crowley nodded reluctantly. My ancestor was the only Crowley to survive. He helped establish the arrangement afterward. I studied the map, noting the distance between peaks. We can't possibly reinforce all 7 circles before nightfall. We don't need to, Catherine said. The breach is at Avery. That's where they're pushing hardest. Secure that one, and we buy time for the others. What about the town? Sarah asked. If these things are waking up, everyone needs to know how to protect themselves. Wade nodded. Council meeting in 1 hour at the town hall. Everyone with authority to spread the word will be there. They won't believe it, Crowley warned. Not without proof. Then we'll give them proof, I said. The hospital isn't far. We bring Professor Kenny here if he's conscious. Let him tell them what he saw. Catherine had moved to a glass case, examining the artifacts inside. We'll need supplies, iron, salt, flares. She turned to Crowley. And blood. Crowley's mouth tightened. There's a freezer in the cellar. My grandmother's blood, preserved with the old methods. Potent. Your family's blood works better than others, Catherine acknowledged grudgingly. Part of your pact. A dubious honor? Crowley said dryly, I'll fetch it. Sarah, would you help me carry things up from the cellar? As they disappeared down a trapdoor behind the counter, Wade turned to Catherine. You really believe all this? Magic blood and ancient pacts? Catherine fixed him with a level stare. You saw what happened on that mountain, Sheriff. What would you call it? Wade had no answer. I pulled out the rules paper again, studying the 7 directives that had saved my life. These rules, they're not just for survival, are they? They're weaknesses. Ways to identify the hollow ones. Ways to evade them. Catherine nodded. My grandfather compiled them after 60 years of fighting these things. Each one represents a lesson learned in blood. She touched the paper gently. Keep that close. We'll need to make copies for everyone. My phone buzzed. Service had returned now that we were back in town. It was the hospital. Professor Kenny is awake. I reported after a brief conversation. Disoriented but stable. He's asking for me specifically. Go, Catherine said decisively. Find out what he remembers, what he knows. We'll prepare here. I'm coming with you, Wade said, keys already in hand. I want a statement from him about what happened up there. We left Catherine examining the maps while Sarah and Crowley gathered supplies from the cellar. The sky had darkened further during our time in the store, unnatural storm clouds gathering over the mountains. The air felt charged, like just before a lightning strike. At Franklin Memorial Hospital, the halls were busier than usual. Nurses moved with hurried efficiency between rooms. In the waiting area, people sat with minor injuries. Cuts, bruises, a broken arm. 3 car accidents this morning, the receptionist explained when Wade asked about the activity. And we've had 6 cases of sleepwalking injuries since last night. Full moon brings out the weirdness, Wade and I exchanged glances. The moon hadn't been full last night, and sleepwalking injuries weren't common in a town this size. Professor Kenny was in a private room on the 2nd floor. He sat propped up in bed, a bandage around his head, an IV in his arm. His skin retained that ashen quality I'd noticed in the stone circle, but his eyes were alert. Officer Hutchkins, he said as I entered, his voice raspy. You found us. Just in time, it seems, I replied, taking the chair beside his bed. How much do you remember? He stared at his hands. Flashes. We were on Avery Peak, stargazing. Then something came from the trees. It looked like a park ranger, but wrong somehow. It called to us, I prompted, using your full names. He looked up sharply. Yes. How did you know? Just confirming some details, Wade said, standing at the foot of the bed. Please continue, Professor. It separated us somehow. I remember trying to keep the students together, but we got confused in the dark. His hands twisted the bedsheet. Then the mist came. Gray, thick. It herded us somewhere. A circle of stones. He shuddered. After that, just fragments, being on my knees, something feeding on me, taking pieces of myself away. And Zoe? I asked. Is she recovering too? Kenny nodded weakly. She's down the hall, hasn't spoken yet, just stares at the ceiling. I leaned closer. Professor, we need your help. These things, the hollow ones, they're waking up, breaking an old arrangement. The town needs to hear what happened to you, what you saw. He recoiled. No, I can't. I can't think about it. I can't speak about it. People will die if you don't, Wade said bluntly. You don't understand. Kenny's voice dropped to a whisper. They're still with me, in my head, watching through my eyes, listening through my ears. What do you mean? I asked carefully. They don't just take, he said, eyes wide and frightened. They leave pieces of themselves behind, like parasites, seeds. His hand moved to his chest. I can feel it here, waiting, growing. Wade took a step back, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. Are you saying you're infected? Kenny nodded miserably. They're inside anyone who survived contact. Me, Zoe, you, Officer Hutchkins. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. That's not possible. I feel fine. So did I, Kenny said. Until the sun starts to set, until they stir. He looked toward the window where the strange storm clouds were darkening the afternoon sky. It's starting already. Can't you feel it? The pull, the hollow places inside, wanting to be filled. Now that he mentioned it, I had felt something, a strange emptiness, an echo where memories had been taken. I had attributed it to shock, to exhaustion. How long? Wade asked. How long until whatever this is takes effect? Nightfall, Kenny whispered. When the mist rises, when they wake fully. He looked at me with desperate eyes. You have to lock us up. Me, Zoe, yourself, anyone who made direct contact before we turn. Turn into what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Hollow ones, Kenny said. New vessels, new bodies for them to wear while they hunt. A commotion erupted in the hallway, raised voices, something crashing to the floor. Wade moved to the door, peering out. What is it? I asked. Sleepwalking patient, Wade reported, but he hesitated. She's walking backward. Rule 7. If a member of your party begins walking backward or sideways, they are no longer your responsibility. Leave them immediately. My radio crackled to life. Catherine's voice came through, tight with urgency. Hutchkins, Wade, get back here now. It's starting. The mist is moving into town from all directions. The barrier is breaking. Wade drew his weapon. We need to evacuate the hospital. Kenny shook his head frantically. No time. Locked down. Iron and salt at every entrance. It's the only way. I looked out the window. The premature darkness had deepened, and tendrils of gray mist were indeed creeping down from the mountains, sliding through the streets of Carabasset Valley like searching fingers. I'll coordinate the hospital lockdown, Wade decided. You get back to Catherine and Crawley. We need those supplies distributed now. What about you? I asked, thinking of what Kenny had said about infection. Wade met my eyes steadily. I didn't make direct contact